On the Track is a web TV show about cryptozoology, natural history, green issues and whatever else the team feel like making up as they go along. Enjoy!
Nuneaton, the jewel of the South Midlands, the town who gave us such great men as George Eliot and Larry Grayson, the throbbing heart of this teeming metropolis, the pearl of the CV13 postcode, down by the roundabout and up the one-way system, is Nuneaton Town Hall, where we can find none other than Nuneaton's Mr. Entertainment.
Hello ladies and gentlemen and boys and girls, I'm Barry Tadcaster and this is my friend Ken Jeffens, who is an Orang Pendek. Hello, my name is Ken Jeffens and I am an Orang Pendek. Unlike the other Orang Pendeks, I do not come from the Indonesian island of Sumatra. I come from the London borough of Lewisham, where I am employed by Lewisham Town Council as an ombudsman.
Go.
Well, Jeff, what are we going to be doing here in the studio today? Well, Bonnie lad, we're going to be cooking pears.
And I think you will agree that that is going to be a culinary delight worth waiting for. Woo.
I really like the old credits.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's a Saturday afternoon. I watched the latest on the track. That was the one about Inkbarrow and the Julie earlier this afternoon, and then I have to admit that I fell fast asleep. However, it's Saturday afternoon, and it'll be Saturday afternoon, I hope, when you're going to be watching this. And welcome to our regular weekly collection of stories about hard science, weird shit, and surreality. I quite liked the way I did it to that episode before last, when I said that I wasn't going to do anything about surreality. I was just going to leave it to your imaginations, and then I had a blue wild boar walking across the screen in front of me. Welcome to my world, because my world is more and more surreal and more peculiar with every day that goes past. By the way, just in case you didn't know, my name's John Downs, and I'm the director of an organisation called the Centre for Fortean Zoology, which for the last 30 years in April has been travelling around the world doing research into mystery animals and publishing our results. Loch Ness is the deepest and probably, to many people, the most mysterious lake in the British Isles. It is, as I'm sure everybody watching this will be aware, reputedly at least, the haunt of a monster. I've been there 3 times now. The last time being 15 years ago, when I went there with a team from a show called Penn and Teller's Bullshit. I did it for 2 very good reasons. One, I'm a fan of Penn and Teller, and I'm particularly interested in the conspiracy theory that Penn and Teller are actually the people behind the mysterious residents. And I hoped to meet them. I didn't, because they weren't there. It was just a shoot on their behalf. And second, because they paid me an obscene amount of money to do so. I think you can find the show on Vimeo somewhere. And whilst we did our sensible cryptozoological scientific pieces to camera explaining what we were doing and how we did it and why we did it, Richard and I also looned around in the way that people have come to expect us to. And we did it because it was fun, and we did it because that was part of our remit. We then came back to real life back in North Devon, and 6 or 8 months later the show was broadcast, luckily not in the UK but only in America, and the number of people who complained saying, "Downes and Freeman, Mr. Chance here to make some serious cryptozoological points." The show was called Bullshit. What the bloody hell did you expect us to do? I wasn't at all surprised that we were portrayed in the way that we were portrayed, because that was the way it was always going to be, and that is why I got paid an obscenely large amount of money for doing it. And remember, at the time I was looking after my dying father, and I had no other forms of income, so I was very grateful to the dear fellows whether or not they're part of the residents. But all of that is a complete digression. I have always been very sceptical about the Loch Ness Monster, and I believe that if it does exist, it's going to be an extremely large eel, which for some reason has grown considerably larger than the eels are supposed to grow. We have hypothesized that the reason these eels grow so humongously large is because they're sterile and don't therefore have the biological imperative which makes them swim down to the sea into the Atlantic Ocean and down to the Sargasso Sea in the South Atlantic, where they mate, spawn, die, and their babies, teensy little things called leptocephali, which are the size and shape of my little fingernail, swim back up into the British coastal waters, whereupon they become teensy weensy little eels called elvers, swim back up the rivers, and the whole process starts again. If, however, they do not have this biological imperative to go down and breed, then they carry on getting larger and larger and larger until they die of whatever. And I believe that this is the only logical answer for the Loch Ness Monster. And at the risk of sounding like Buffy the Vampire Slayer, I believe that only once or twice in any generation do you have an eel which has grown large enough to be called a monster, which is why in Loch Ness you have so few, very, very few indeed, sightings, because if there was an air-breathing plesiosaur there, you'd see it many, 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 many times more than you would than the number of sightings that people get now. But I'm digressing again, because I'm talking about the Loch Ness Monster, not because I want to give you a lecture on our Loch Ness Monster theories. I think I've already done that once or twice, and no doubt will do it again when it is relevant, but it is because this week the Loch Ness Monster has been in the news again, or rather the absence of the Loch Ness Monster has been in the news again, and has thrown up some quite interesting, how does one say, aspects to the story. Now that's not quite right, but you know what I mean. People who've worked in fortean research over the years will be very aware that things happen in waves, that you have a whole string of stories on one particular subject and then nothing. Well, we've got something a bit like this at the moment, which I find mildly interesting. In this morning's emails, it included a story from Google's news alerts in which Gary Campbell of the official Loch Ness Monster fan club is saying that there's nothing to worry about the fact that there are no Loch Ness Monster sightings so far in 2022. It is because, he says, that there are never very many Loch Ness Monster sightings during the first months of the year, the cold and the wet months when people would have to be nut jobs, my words, not his, to go walking around the Scottish Highlands. Well, that's a little bit like the old thing of if a tree falls in the wood, there's no one there to hear it, does it make a sound? Well, if there is nobody wandering around the shores of Loch Ness to see one, does that mean there are no Loch Ness monster surfacings? Well, yes and no, because these days the majority of Loch Ness monster sightings, or at least the ones that I have heard about, are via the Loch Ness monster webcam. And I think there's something more interesting about the fact that there are no Loch Ness monster webcam sightings from the first 3 months of this year, because let's face it, those can be done from the safety and comfort of your own sitting room, just watching your computer screen. And if there haven't been any of those, and there haven't even been any sightings registered from the indomitable Owen O'Fadigan, and I still suspect that I'm pronouncing it wrong, so I've got it written down here, and if anybody can tell me that I am pronouncing it wrong and can give me the correct pronunciation, please write it phonetically for me in the comments below. But even if dear Owen O'Fadigan has not registered any sightings, then what is happening? I will give you one very simple and very obvious answer. Lockdown's over. And people who had many spare hours to be able to do what they wished, including scanning the Loch Ness webcam sites to see if they could see the monster, now do not have that luxury. And so the large number of sightings that have been reported in the last couple of years are almost certainly bound to plummet. But let's wait and see what happens when the tourist season is upon us and people actually are walking around the shores of Loch Ness, or at least the footpaths and roads on the shores of Loch Ness, in their thousands and maybe even tens of thousands. Be interesting. So watch this space. Yesterday afternoon, just after I'd finished recording the segment that you've just watched about the Loch Ness Monster, I had a message through Facebook Messenger from my old friend Nigel Wright. He wrote and said, "Hi John, I thought you might be interested in this story and photo of our old friend the Wolverine." And he sent me a story which I'm going to tell you very soon about wolverines in Yellowstone National Park. However, I think I should explain slightly, at least, why he referred to it as our old friend. And that is because 20 plus years ago, sometime in the end of the last century, Nigel, Richard and I were very much involved in the search for out-of-place animals in the forests near Exeter, particularly in a place called Haldon Hills. And at the time there were stories going all around the country that somebody had released wolverines for various reasons. Wolverines, of course, being the largest and most ferocious member of the weasel family in Europe. They're not the largest all told, because the largest all told, I believe, is the giant otter from South America. And although I would love to say that somebody released them into the River Exe, at the moment I cannot confirm nor deny that, which is polite journalism speak for saying it's a lovely idea but a stupid story. I have to apologise for the noise of Archie, who's up on the landing windowsill, barking at people who are passing by in a vain attempt to try and prove to everybody that he is the alpha male carnivore in the household, when it's obviously Peanut. It can't be me, because I'm very nearly a vegan, so I'm not going to be an anything carnivore. But I'm digressing. Nigel, me and Richard set out lots of sand traps and baits and other useful tools to try and catch proper evidence of these wolverines in the Haldon Hills, and it has to be said we were completely and utterly unsuccessful. We did speak to several people who believed that they had seen something that sounded very much like a wolverine, but as we thought at the time, and as I still think now, we're probably talking about somebody who saw very muddy badgers or something very similar. But Nigel and I became mildly obsessed with the wolverine, and he sends me all these wolverine stories as and when they turn up. I first heard about Yellowstone National Park, which is in Wyoming and a little bit of Idaho, and let me just check where else it goes, and Montana, when I was about 7 years old, and I was convinced that they got the name wrong because I was confusing it with a Yellowstone, which of course is the national park where Yogi Bear lives, and that's far more important. It is undoubtedly the oldest national park in the United States, having been granted its parkhood, or should that be nationalhood, I don't know, way back in 1872 by President Ulysses S. Grant. Many people also claim that it is therefore the oldest national park in the world. But, as Morrissey once pointed out, I'm sorry chaps, America is not the world. Oh dee 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 tiddly pom. It seems that wolverines are elusive throughout their range, not just the part of it which probably doesn't include the Haldon Hills outside Exeter, because between 2006 and 2009 an in-depth survey found only 7 individuals, which makes the fact that 2 separate people saw an individual wolverine in the middle of Yellowstone National Park earlier this week really quite remarkable, because this is no muddy badger, this is no whatever, it is undoubtedly a wolverine. At least 2 photographs were taken, and I'm including them here because, as the property of the United States Fish and Wildlife Services, they are copyright free, and this is one of the things that I really admire about the United States. Well done, chaps. There's also apparently some footage, but I haven't seen it. But this is actually something which gives hope, I think, to people who are looking for wolverines in other places, because it's the first wolverine to have been seen for a long time. It's important enough for the Fish and Wildlife Services to put out a press release about it, and interesting enough for various American newspapers and news websites to cover it. So, if a creature that is known to be in Yellowstone National Park can be this elusive, if the stories of wolverines being released into the United Kingdom, and I still take them very much cum grano salis, because I am not very impressed with the sources of the stories, but if they are true, it does suggest that hunting wolverines in places like Haldon Hills might be even more difficult than Nigel, Richard and I discovered about 20 years ago. So, watch this space again, chaps.
If you want to support us and help us make more content like these, please press like, subscribe, follow our Facebook page and check out our Patreon.
And as the ghost of Joe Strummer, who is an ever more regular visitor to my little studio, wants me to remind you, always press the notification bell. Otherwise you won't be told when there's a new show to watch. And that would be an awful pity, wouldn't it? Well, ladies and gentlemen, here we are at the end of another show. I rather enjoyed putting this one together. Both segments were really a trip right down memory lane for me. It took me back to a time when I could walk properly, when I didn't stagger around the place, and when I could still drive a car and do exciting things. I did have an email this week saying, why is it that I'm always filmed sitting down with a blanket on my knee? I'm sorry guys, I thought you all knew I'm very disabled, and although I can walk, I can't really walk outside unaided, and I need walking aids and sticks and a Zimmer frame, all sorts of stuff to help me around the house. And I spend an awful lot of my time on medication in this chair with a blanket on my knee. I'm not asking you all to feel sorry for me, it's just the way things work out, you know. And the way I see it, in life, you have to just play the cards that you're dealt by the good Lord and wait and see what happens. I had another comment on yesterday's show, which I thought was really rather nice. It was from somebody called CHA5, and I have absolutely no idea who he, she, they, or any other pronoun are, but they described us as cryptozoology's answer to Monty Python, which I think is a very kind thing to do. And yes, I think that describes what we're doing reasonably well. Thank you very much, CHA5, whoever you are. We're at the end of another show. I've run out of things to say on either Wolverines or the Loch Ness Monster. I'd like to say thank you to the people who helped this time. Graham, as always. To Nigel for sending me the story. And I can't remember who sent me the Loch Ness Monster story. Oh, it doesn't matter. I probably said so somewhere. Thank you very much to everybody who supports us each week, who continues to watch the show. And I hope you'll be there to see us next time, because we'll be back on Wednesday with another On the Track Extra. And then next Saturday, it's only 7 days away, we'll be back with another episode of this show. And if you're there to watch me and I'm there, I'll be seeing you.